We need Americans of goodwill to unite against a politics that too often has been characterized by corruption.
A Ukrainian natural gas company accused of corruption appoints Hunter Biden to their board of directors.
Carelessness.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
Self-dealing.
I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money.
Disinformation.
Corn Pop was a bad dude.
Ignorance.
Gay bathhouses.
And just plain meanness.
Why, you're getting nervous, man.
Join Joe.
Trump is going to eat him alive.
We need Americans of goodwill to unite against a politics that too often has been characterized by corruption.
A Ukrainian natural...
Now, this was Obama's speech to the graduating class where Obama went after Trump in that speech. Donald Trump has gone on the attack, and he's put out 2 ads. Now, that was one, but the second one I'm going to show you is the one that lands, and that is extremely good. And I am apoplectic about it. Now, not because Donald Trump made this ad targeting Joe Biden, more so because of the content of the ad. Almost 6-7 months ago, I said Donald Trump is going to hit Joe Biden on racism and on lying. And some people looked at me and was like, there's no way Donald Trump is going to do that. That will be massively hypocritical. And I said, Donald Trump, mark my words, will attack him on issues of lying and on issues of racism. And what do you know? Donald Trump has opened up that attack. The lane for that attack came when Joe Biden basically said that black people weren't black if they didn't vote for him. You ain't black if you don't support me. Now, he said this on The Breakfast Club to Charlemagne the God, and it's gotten a huge amount of airplay because of how over the top and gross that is. I mean, as if my skin color somehow gives you my vote just by definition, almost in this kind of cosmic way that God created people who look like me to basically vote for one shitty Joe Biden. I can guarantee you that is not the case. And nevertheless, that is what Joe Biden said. And fact is, that's probably what Joe Biden believes. That's probably what the Democratic Party believes. That's why all these people get out there and vote shame when they can't necessarily make an affirmative argument for their person. Either way, I am massively pissed because this is the attack that I kept saying Sanders needed to use. This is the attack that I kept saying you have to unleash this. How can you not unleash this? It is not due diligence. I mean, it is basically flagrant, a flagrant foul in regards to your responsibilities of trying to get elected, especially when people are giving you cash. You are supposed to do everything within your power to try to get into office, providing it's legal. And I got to be honest, the fact that Donald Trump can use this attack, and Donald Trump doesn't get the full bang for its buck. Sanders would have been the person who got the full bang for its buck. But the fact that Trump could use this attack makes the point that the attack could have been, and not just could have been, should have been used if indeed the objective was to win this race. I suspect Sanders really was running scared the entirety of this race, somewhat of a cowardly way to run a campaign. And nevertheless, here we are. Sanders, dereliction of duty. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal and Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you the opportunity for allowing me to do it. I think I said that weirdly, but that's okay. Oh, by the way, contributor appreciation will be this evening. We decided to have it on Memorial Day as opposed to Sunday. But let's start here. I was really pissed off when I saw this ad, because it brought the entire election of 2020 back in focus to me, and the things that I had been saying 6-7 months ago in regards to what needed to take place in the way that Sanders was running the campaign. And Sanders would eventually get around to some of that stuff, but would do so in such weak ways. And it seemed like he didn't quite understand that the strengths of Joe Biden needed to be challenged, because those things weren't really strengths at all when you put those things under a microscope. Be it issues of electability or his closeness with the African-American community. Both of those things could have been chipped away, or at the very least, let's say, if not negated, minimized, or finding a workaround to undermine the amount of support that he was getting in those communities. What Donald Trump is going to do here in this video is basically do what I just said. Now, this very specific attack comes in line with race. And it's not so much that this attack is going to bring people or African Americans onto Joe Biden's ticket. That's not it. This is politics, after all. I have only two ways, really, to win this race. And at the end of the day, I need more votes. Meaning I need to either make an affirmative argument to get those votes, or I need to cut down a vote total in an area where you're strong at that I can't necessarily mitigate in any other way. So if you are, let's say, strong with the African-American vote or strong with the issue of electability, well, I need to attack those issues. I know the African-American vote is tied to electability, so there's a tether between those things to some degree. I need to attack both of those, and I need to find an argument and a way to go after those issues. For Donald Trump, he understands that Joe Biden is going to get the black vote in spades. He understands he is not going to get the black vote. However, if he can make an argument that will turn off a percentage of the African-American vote, that's better than not doing that. Meaning, his objective here is to drive down the total, to get people pissed off and disenchanted from the political system. I would imagine that he knows that the majority of non-voters are people of color and people making under $30,000. And if you can peel away that many more from that electorate, depending on the states, you may be able to pull out a win. Let's listen to the video, and I'm going to add a little bit more context to what Donald Trump is saying here.
And if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black, take a look at my record, man.
When I marched in the civil rights movement, I marched with tens of thousands of others.
He had not actually marched during the civil rights movement and kept telling the story anyway.
I came out of the civil rights movement. I was one of those guys that sat in and marched and all that stuff.
Now, his aides went back to say, look, he was in office marching for the idea.
That's not what the word marching means on Twitter.
I was not out marching.
If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, and you ain't black,
They're going to put you all back in chains.
and you ain't black,
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
you ain't black, you ain't black, you ain't black, you ain't black.
The most racist thing a person could tell me is that I'm supposed to choose something based on my race.
You ain't black.
The one thing that Donald Trump should have added in that video is Joe Biden saying black folks can't take care of their kids. And then he should have immediately went to Zerlina Maxwell on MSNBC saying, oh my God, that is so racist, he has to drop out. That's what you should have had in that video. And you should have put that at the very end of the video to make it sting that much more. Because Zerlina Maxwell is basically a Hillary supporter and a Warren supporter and a Joe Biden supporter. And to make it that much more plain for somebody like her basically saying, oh my God, what he said there was the most racist thing that I've ever heard in my life, would have made that stick. Just advice. If you're going to do a video like this, do it right. I hope you understand my point when I point out and say that part where Joe Biden is lying about civil rights. If Sanders was going into South Carolina, Sanders needed the black vote. How do you get that black vote? You're not getting it with an affirmative argument. You're getting it by driving down the numbers, by pointing out that he's lying. That vote is a vote to some degree on race. But more than anything else, it's a vote on, or it's an argument that he's a liar. This guy's sitting here lying to you about being a part of the civil rights, something so sacred and something so precious and something that was so forceful in regards to getting you from there to here. This guy's willing to be so shitty of a person that he would actually take this and lie about it for political expedience. That's the attack. Now, that attack works whether it's Sanders or whether it's Trump. But for Trump, like I said, it's less bang for its buck because the only thing for Trump it can do is drive down the tally. With Sanders, with his record of actually being a part of those things, he could actually potentially take some of those votes, even if he just bleeds some of the other ones out of the process. I hope you understand what I mean. It's a dereliction of duty, to put it mildly, to not use everything that you have at your disposal to go after your opponent. And as we can see, Trump has no issue with using that opposition research. One thing that needs to be entirely understood, that if Sanders really did want Trump to lose, if he really did want Joe Biden to beat Donald Trump, then you should have brought all of this out. Meaning, if you wanted Trump to lose, regardless of whether it's to you or whether it's to Biden, it is your job, philosophically, to bring this content out. The reason why you bring this out is because you don't know whether or not Joe Biden has a glass jaw. By putting that stuff in the primary, you get to see whether or not the candidate can stand that sort of pressure and that sort of attacks as they go into the general election. If they can't, then good, you've just found a weakness and a flaw in your candidate as you move forward and go into the general. After all, the entire point is to get the strongest candidate, usually. But that wasn't the point this time around, right? And the question is, does Sanders have a hand in that? If Sanders is not willing to do everything that he needs to do to win, does he have a hand in his own demise? Intentionally. I mean, I don't know where else to go with that, right? I mean, basically, I'm looking at a situation where philosophically, you're supposed to make those attacks. You need to know whether or not the opponent is weak against these attacks. You also want to be able to inoculate your opponent going in later. So the attacks that you use in the primary aren't necessarily going to be used in the general. Maybe, maybe not, but at the very least, the potency of it goes down as the audience gets inoculated to that information. That's the way politics works. They've decapitated this process in order to ensure that somebody who was not Sanders basically exceeds the primary. And that's a goddamn shame. Here's the thing. Joe Biden, to give additional context, this is Joe Biden's first run. I want to show you how bad and the level of lying that had taken place in this primary process. And part and parcel to the reason why I say Sanders should have did the civil rights video is because the more Joe Biden lied over the campaign trail, the more you can point back and create a context for that lying. Kind of like with Obama and Mitt Romney. When Obama was running against Romney in 2012, he spent a ton of money in swing states. And he spent it on this notion that this guy is Scrooge McDuck. This guy is the person in Christmas Carol. God, I can't think of his name. Bah humbug. Like, basically, this guy is swimming in money. And he's a plutocrat. He's a robber baron, et cetera, et cetera. That was basically the image that he wanted to create. He gets his employees to build a stage. He'll stand on that stage and fire its employees, fire on his way out. That's the guy who Mitt Romney is. And that worked, right? Because the moment that Mitt Romney came out with that 40% are takers, bam, fits right within the context of what Obama had created for Romney. I'm saying that Sanders should have did the same thing, and he should have been repetitive about this guy's unelectable, look at the line, etc. Hillary Clinton lost, Al Gore lost, John Kerry lost. He's just one of those people, he's going to lose. Those things had to hit directly at the mechanisms of this particular campaign, or the thing that this campaign hinged on. And this campaign hinged on electability. And Sanders just wanted to give speeches.
And I'd go to 8 o'clock Mass, then I'd go to Reverend Herring's church where we'd meet in order to organize and figure where we were going to go, whether we were going to desegregate the Rialto movie theater or what we were going to do. I got my education for real in the black church. And that's not hyperbole, it's a fact.
During the 60s, I was, in fact, very concerned about the civil rights movement. I was not an activist. I worked at an all-black swimming pool in the east side of Wilmington, Delaware. I was involved in what they were thinking, what they were feeling. I was involved, but I was not out marching. I was not down in Selma. I was not anywhere else. I was a suburbanite kid who got a dose of exposure to what was happening to black Americans when I'm in my own city.
And as for stealing speeches, before we get to the stealing speeches thing, now that you've seen that, and now that you've seen Trump's ad, put this in context.
Published an op-ed piece that said Vice President Biden has, quote, repeatedly betrayed black voters to side with Republican lawmakers and undermine our progress. Senator Sanders, do you agree with her, one of your most visible surrogates, that Vice President Biden has repeatedly betrayed black voters?
Well, I think what Senator Turner was talking about are some of the early actions of Vice President Biden. But no, Joe Biden is...
He puts a knife in Nina Turner. How do you win a campaign like that? Take them to the water, give them the opportunity to drink on a national stage. You could bring up the cuts to potential Social Security and how it would impact African Americans. You could bring up the crime bill that Joe Biden kept pushing for, even though he knew about the disparity between crack and cocaine. I know Sanders signed it, but Joe Biden was pushing for that bill whole hog. You could point out the lying about civil rights, which is a much bigger deal, by the way, and you would be able to get that out on mainstream, allowing for the press and everything else to keep that in the media over a period of time. I'm just making the point that you could have said all sorts of things here. You didn't have to put a knife in Nina Turner. Considering that you needed the black vote, tremendously so, this was your chance, this was your pitch to be able to make that work in somewhat of an organic way because she asked you the question. There's a such thing in politics as being able to do contrast, meaning I need to be able to say that this person is lying. And if you can't say that this person is lying, then that person can do anything. Joe Biden could have came out here and ran like Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is never going to say that Joe Biden is lying. And so it's problematic to me that you will run a campaign where you have a fundamental inability to say the guy's not telling the truth. By the time he did get to that point, it was the last debate. He was, a few weeks from suspending his campaign. Also, to give you context to the plagiarizing that got Joe Biden kicked out of that election, it wasn't just a little bit of plagiarism. Let's take a look.
But this standard is not a measure of how we can evaluate the condition of our society. It cannot measure the health of our children, the quality of our education, the joy of their play.
Yet the gross national product does not allow for the health of our children, the quality of their education, or the joy of their play.
Let us pledge that our generation of Americans will pay any price, bear any burden, accept any challenge, and meet any hardship to secure the blessings of prosperity and the promise of opportunity for our children.
We shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
There's an entire series of these. Just Joe Biden ripping off speeches. One speech after the next. If Trump can wield this attack, so could Sanders. He just chose not to. Like, share, and subscribe.